Inshallah. Alright, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een, amma ba'd. So, today we're going to be talking about four main topics in hadith. One of them is the importance of time. The second one is the importance of knowledge and wisdom. The third is the self-control. And the fourth is the rights of other people. So, they're all hadiths or prophetic statements or sayings that are going to be categorized in one of these four categories today. Now there's always a way to classify hadith in a different category. Sometimes categories overlap, but this is a general categorization that we have. In terms of repeating the hadith out loud, I've decided that we're not going to have a sufficient amount of time to do that. I think perhaps it's going to be difficult. So what we can do is we can try it for this week, and if it doesn't work out and it's becoming very long, then we're going to go ahead and skip it for the following week. So it's going to be a test run just so that you understand. If you can't read Arabic, it's fine. Just try to listen and follow along. And if you don't want to say it, that's fine. Don't say it. So I'm going to say the hadith and we're going to try and go as fast as possible. Okay, so please try to repeat after me as quick as possible. Inshallah, I'm going to go piece by piece, not the entire hadith. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ni'matani maghbunun fihima كثير من الناس الصحة والفراغ." So the Prophet said, two blessings which many people waste are good health and free time. And this is narrated by Imam Bukhari, as the key says. So here's the thing. The Prophet is telling us this statement, and he's trying to convey a very important message. The first thing we have to understand with regards to this is, he says that there are two blessings. Now what is a blessing? The word ni'mah or ni'matani here, two blessings, is something that's been given to you by Allah or given to you by somebody. In this case, these blessings have been given to us by Allah. Now if you have a blessing is like a gift that somebody has given you. It's not even like a gift, it's more like a trust that they've loaned to you, and there's a responsibility that comes with that trust. So what is that trust? What are you supposed to do with it? If someone loans you something or someone entrusts you with something, what are you supposed to do with it? You're supposed to utilize that thing. You're supposed to use it in the right way. You're not supposed to abuse it. You're not supposed to go off on the wrong, do the wrong things with regards to, the thing that you've been given. So Imam al-Ghazali, he gives an example. One of the great scholars of Islam, he says your time, particularly your time, is like capital that you have. Imagine you are running a business and you have, your job is to take this amount of money and invest it in the right way so that you can make more money out of this. That's your capital, right, that you have. That's the capital that you possess. Your goal is to do what? Is to take this capital and make profits out of it by utilizing it, investing it in the right places. If you invest it in the wrong investment and you buy something which has no value, or you buy something which nobody wants, you buy the old type of computers which are outdated, you're not going to make money off of them, right? So what did you end up doing? You wasted that capital, or you wasted that blessing that you had, and it just went away. There's nothing you can do with it. So Imam Ghazali says, he says that your time is like your capital in life, which you're supposed to invest in order to do good deeds, to give you success in the next life. So what is your time? Allah gave you time to do what? He gave you time to invest it and rack up as many good deeds and do as many things which are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as possible. And if you take that time and you waste it in something, it's like spending it in something which is not going to benefit you at all. And it's not, once you waste the time and the time is gone, what's going to end up happening? You don't have any capital left to invest. So now you find a great investment and you say, well, this guy is selling this group of devices which I could sell for double. But you know what? You have no capital left. You can't even buy it. Same thing with our time. So our time is something very similar, something that we need to invest, and we need to be very, very careful about that. And health goes along with the time. It's the same thing. It's a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So what else did the Prophet say? It's gonna kind of teach you how to break down a hadith and break down prophetic statements and how to understand them. He said, "Fihima kathirun minan nas." Many people waste. Right? Many people waste them. The question is, why do many people waste them? Is it because Allah has programmed them that way? Not necessarily. Not just because everyone is doing something, it means that that's in their natural disposition. Not necessarily. But there's something about them that causes most people to go off in this and do these type of things, waste their time, waste their health. Why? What is that? That actually is something which Allah created in us, which is what you can call desire, which you can call, instinct. You can call it whatever you want. But Allah gave us a free will to decide what we want to do. We can choose this, we can choose this, we can choose this path. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put these instincts or these desires in us, and they're supposed to be channeled in the right way. And when people channel them in the wrong way, and they take these desires and they follow them rather than directing them with no direction, what you end up finding is these people their desires will overpower them and they're not able to do anything else. They only follow whatever their desires are telling them to do. So they say, you know what? I spend all my time in just eating, drinking, and playing around and just having fun. Anytime there's something serious, I'm just not interested because I'd rather be eating. Right? Like people, they have those license plates. So, I'd rather be playing golf, I'd rather be doing something like that. So it's like, imagine one guy's got like this license plate, I'd rather just be having fun. That's it. Everything in life is just about fun, that's it. What would you do then? What capital do you have left to invest? What can you do with your time? Nothing. Right? So many people end up falling in this trap and wasting these two things because their desires have overpowered them. Now, there's something you have to understand. When the Prophet is telling you something is bad behavior, this is not a good thing, but most people are doing it. In essence, what is he telling you? Saying that you need to be an exception. Right? You should not be like this group of people or this most people. And this is something that we find common times, especially in American society, where we kind of have these debates about, do we become like everyone else, or do we stand out? To what level do we assimilate? Do we not, integrate? All of these type of things. One thing we need to understand and remember, regardless of all of these debates and all of these discussions and everything else, we need to understand that no matter what happens, regardless of all these other things, at the end of the day, the Muslim will be an exception when it comes to moral values. That's the whole point. They will be an exception unless they're the majority in a particular place, and they're all doing that. And you find throughout the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about that. So when the Prophet says most people are going to waste these two things, it's telling you be the exception. You don't follow what most people are doing because you don't need to imitate what they're doing. Okay? And then he said waste, right? I translated the word maghbunun as waste. Okay? And you don't need to know the subtle Arabic aspects of it. You don't need to, connect the Arabic with the English, but just get the main point. So I translated maghbunun as waste, but actually the word is an economic term, which means to be cheated or to be deceived, to be duped into giving up something. So they're actually wasted through a sense of deception. They've been cheated out of these things. They've been cheated out of their capital. The question is, who cheated them? Themselves. Right? That's it. Themselves. They cheated themselves. It's implied within the statement that if most people are being cheated out of this, and the Prophet is saying you should be an exception, don't get yourself cheated out of these things, who cheated you? You cheated yourself. Right? You cheated yourself. So, they've been cheated out of their capital. So that's part of the understanding of this hadith. The next thing is health. So what is health? What is the definition of health? Right? If you're explaining this hadith to somebody else, you have to give it in a class or something like that. Try to understand, try to focus on some of the concepts that are here. So as-sihha is health. Health is the ability to do things. Health doesn't mean that there's not a single illness or even pain that you ever feel in your body. No, health is a general ability to be able to do things, general health. You're able to move around, you're able to walk, you're able to jog, you're able to stand and pray. You don't have to sit in a chair, or you don't have to lie on the floor or something like that. That's general health. So the general health that you've been given is something which people, when they get old, they're not going to be able to do anymore. When they become old, they're not able to function the same way. When they became sick, when they have some major illness or something like that, they're not able to do the things that they used to do in the past, right? And most importantly, once they die, the health is completely gone. Their job is to utilize this health that they have so that they can do the things that they need to get done right now. Now here's the thing. If you don't have the health, or if you wait until the health is taken away from you and you've been cheated out of it because you cheated yourself, will you have a great excuse to say, well, now I'm sick and now I'm not able to do these things, therefore Allah is testing me with this, so I'm not going to be held responsible for what I didn't do in the past? No. Right? Because at that time you had health. So the Prophet is saying, take advantage of it in case it's gone. Don't waste it, because there may be a time, and there will be a time, where your health starts going down and starts going away. So something very important to focus on. And then, free time. What is the definition of free time? Almost everyone has time. It's how they prioritize their time, right? So free time, meaning things that are non-essential. Essential meaning essential for your survival, essential for your family, essential for your necessities of life. You need to eat, you need to drink. Yes, you need to work to an extent. You need to spend quality time with certain people who are, important to you. You need to, sleep. You need to use the bathroom. You need to, generally take care of your body. These are general needs. Everything outside of those main needs, and you're spending your time on something else, those are kind of like luxuries, comforts, other things that you do. So those things are considered to be your use of your free time. And most people have a lot of free time, but they're not utilizing it. So to recap, basically, the Prophet, peace be upon him, is telling us that people have two blessings that they've been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And most people waste these two blessings doing either bad things or doing nothing with the things that they've been given. And those two blessings are having good health, the ability to do things, and having free time, the time to actually accomplish those things which you would need to get done. And everything about Islam tells you what you should be doing and what Allah likes, and the things you shouldn't be doing, and the things you can do, but the things which you're allowed to do, you shouldn't do them to such an extent where you have no time left to do the things you're supposed to be doing in the first place. Okay? Any questions? Very clear. Okay. Next hadith then. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Min husni Islamil mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nih." Okay, the Prophet said, it's better for a Muslim to leave what does not concern him or her. It's better for a Muslim to leave what is not important, which really is not essential. Okay, this is narrated by Tirmidhi. So what did the Prophet say? Min husni Islamil mar'i. Literally it means from the good characteristics of the Islam of a person, of a person's Islam. Meaning, from the good characteristics of Islam is such and such action. You'll find the Prophet making these kinds of statements. He'll make statements which say, for example, it's a good thing if you do this, a true believer does this. This is a form of expression. What is he actually trying to say? What is the main point that he's trying to convey? He's saying a true believer, or a person who wants to practice Islam fully, will do such and such. Okay, that's basically what he's saying. But he's wording it in different ways to kind of, drive the point home. So it's a style of speaking. And then he says, they'll leave what doesn't concern them, or what doesn't concern him. So what does that mean, leaving? What are you leaving? Right? You could be leaving something with regard to your speech. Meaning, if something doesn't concern you, and it doesn't relate to you, and it's not your business, or you have no right speaking about it because you're not qualified, or whatever it may be, you avoid that in speech. So you don't need to worry about trying to say certain things. When it comes to actions, if you're doing certain things which are superfluous, you're doing certain things which actually have no real benefit, or not just benefit, but they don't concern you because it's not your field, or they don't concern you because it's not something that you need to do, or you need to get involved with, then one of the best things to do is to avoid that. So why is the Prophet ﷺ telling us this? He's telling us this because time is limited. People's time is limited. So if you spend your time doing and speaking or doing things which don't concern you, where is the time going to be left for the things that do concern you? Right? The things that you need to actually get done. Many people today, they complain about, I don't have time. I don't have time, and can you make it to class? I can't make it to class, I don't have time. Can you meet me there? I don't have time. People always say don't have time. Why don't they have time left over if they're really, really busy? It's because they were doing so many things which didn't really concern them, which were not priorities in their life. So the Prophet is saying, get your priorities back. And this is again about the importance of time. Because if you focus on too many things which don't concern you, you won't have time for the things which do concern you. It's a very simple formula here. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, replace the time you would have spent doing something which didn't concern you with something which does concern you, with something which is going to benefit you, something which is really something that you need to be doing in the first place. Okay? Now here's the question. The concern, right? What concerns you in the first place, right? What does it mean by something which concerns you, right? Ma la ya'ni. What is ya'ni? Meaning something which you're concerned about. Okay? So concern means something which is unnecessary for your life and unnecessary for your religion. Things which concern you are necessary or important for your life and necessary and important for your religion. If something else outside of that, it generally doesn't concern you, right? It's something that's not that needed. So this could mean two things. It means don't waste your time in superfluous things which are not necessary. And number two, something which is not your field of business, it's not your area of expertise. You shouldn't be engaging in this conversation because you weren't invited to even talk about this subject. You should avoid it. You should stay away from it. Okay? That's things which are in concern. Okay? And then why? As we said before, why? What is the reason behind this? What is the wisdom behind this? Because it wastes your time, number one. It's a waste of your time and there's no need for you. You have better things to do. And number two, doing this may lead to something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be displeased with. Because if you keep getting involved in things which are not your field, or they're not your area of expertise, or you're not invited to speak about them, it can cause problems in your life, and it can cause problems in your religion, in Islam as well. So we have to be very, very careful about these things. Okay? Any questions on this hadith? Inshallah, very clear so far. Okay. Moving on. The Prophet ﷺ said, "May yuridillahu bihi khayra yufaqihu fid din." Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ said, when Allah intends to benefit someone, He gives him a deep understanding of the religion. And this is in Bukhari. Gives him a deep understanding of the religion. Okay, that's the translation. Now what does it mean? Number one, when Allah wants to benefit someone, when He wants khair for somebody else, what does benefit mean? See, khair or goodness or benefit from the human perspective oftentimes is something worldly. Right? Something worldly. And what we think generally is, if Allah is doing me a favor, He'll give me a big house. And He'll give me a nice car. And He'll give me lots of money in the bank. And He'll give me this and He'll give me that. The Prophet is not talking about that. He is redefining for you what is actually good in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So He's trying to tell you that when Allah wants to do something good for you, He wants to benefit you, He wants to help you out or something like that, what will He do? He will give you something that's related to the spiritual, from the religion, from Islam. Something that's going to benefit you beyond a material possession. This is very interesting because had you read only the first half of the hadith, some people might think that whenever Allah intends to benefit somebody, and imagine you had to fill out the blank yourself. You have a survey. You say, well, He would make me do really good on a test at school. And He would make me do really good. And this is interesting because imagine you get a perfect score on your multiple choice for this class. Okay? Imagine that, and you feel really good. But you think about it from this perspective, because you got all of the things right, there may have been one or two questions where you were guessing and you were debating between two answers. And you weren't sure which one was correct. And you just guessed. And you picked that one. And you got it right. And you moved on and you didn't even look back at your test. You moved on and you got perfect points. There's another person who was exactly at the same level as you. They had the same questions and they were debating between the same two answers. They couldn't figure out which one was right. And they got it wrong because they guessed wrong. They're going to go back to their test and they're going to look and they're going to see why they got it wrong. And which one of these two is more likely to remember the right answer in the future? The second one, right? So it could be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted something good from you. And how did He want something good from you? From your perspective, you would think, well, He should have given me a perfect score. But from another perspective, it's actually better for you in the long run if you got that one wrong, because now you're going to check it, it's going to stay in your mind, and you're going to remember in the future. A world of difference, right? So the Prophet ﷺ is redefining what is good. He's redefining for you, what does it really mean that something is actually good for you? This is in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He knows better what's good in the long run. Not just scores and certain material things. It's above and beyond that. So, what does He say? He said He gives him, right? He gives him a deep understanding of the religion. What does this mean? He gives him, right? It's not only through a person's own efforts. It's not that you can just all of a sudden come one day and say, you know what? I'm going to study 5 hours, and because I'm so intelligent, I'm guaranteed that I'm going to learn all of these things. Not necessarily. There are people who study less than you and they get it, and there are people who study more than you and they don't get it. Why is that? It's not only intellectual capacity. It's because you have to have the acceptance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. You have to put in the effort, and you have to have the acceptance from Allah. And that's something that's very important. So Allah is trying to tell us, يُفَقِّهُ. He gives him the understanding. He didn't say the guy gets the understanding himself. He didn't say يَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. He said Allah gives him the understanding. So it is very clear where it's coming from. And we have to understand that, not become arrogant and think that everything just comes from ourselves. It's above and beyond that. And then, the main part of the hadith. Allah gives him يُفَقِّهُ, right? This is from the word fiqh, right? And for those of you who are taking Islamic law, you understand where the word fiqh is. We talked about it. Fiqh literally means understanding, but it means deep understanding. It means a deep level of comprehension, a deep level of understanding, fid deen, in the religion. You can deeply comprehend things in this world. You can zoom in, you could be a scientist, you can do all these things. That's a deep comprehension. But the most important thing, one of the great things, that if Allah wants you, He'll let you have a deep understanding. Why is a shallow understanding not sufficient? Why is it not okay to simply have a very basic understanding or something like that? Why is it not going to be sufficient? It's not going to be sufficient because you can lead to the wrong conclusions. Like we talked about the dangers in quoting hadiths, right? We talked about the different ways people don't understand the context or something like that. That can lead to a problem. That can lead to many complications. So the thing is, when Allah wants somebody to understand or do something good, He gives them a deep understanding so they know what to do and they know when to do it. Does it mean necessarily that they're going to do it? Well, in order, if you're going to do something right, you have to have the understanding first. If you don't have an understanding, you can't act without knowing. There's no action without knowledge, because then you're acting upon ignorance, and you don't know if you hit or you miss. And in the sight of Islam, in Allah's sight, if you acted with ignorance and you hit, you still don't get rewarded for it, because you acted on ignorance. All right? This is the problem. So it's very important for people to understand this. Now the opposite exists. There's an opposite. What's called in textual analysis, it's called mafhum al-mukhalafa, right? Which means the inverse understanding. What is the inverse understanding? It means the opposite. So, if Allah wants to do good to somebody, He gives them a deep understanding. If Allah wants to do something bad to somebody, what will He give them? Either a shallow or no understanding of the deen, just ignorance. And that's why you find that people who are quoting, or people who are doing things, or people who don't have a very deep understanding, you can be very assured that Allah is, either testing them or punishing them somehow, because their understanding of the deen is very superficial, or they didn't put in the effort that they were supposed to be putting in. So it's the opposite, right? So this is something that we need to understand. When Allah doesn't want you to benefit, it's going to be the opposite. So this is one of the most important things we can really understand about the importance of knowledge. Is that understanding to a deep level where you're going to be able to understand what to do, when to do it, and how to practice it, and how to do these things, or when to speak, or when to remain quiet. This is all something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives, but you have to put effort in as well. Okay? And most scholars, they started their books on fiqh, on Islamic law in particular, with this hadith on the top, reminding people that if you want to try to get a deeper understanding of your religion. So that's the reason why we started CIS, College of Islamic Studies, so people can have a deeper understanding of their religion. Inshallah. Any questions on this? Yes, it applies to everything. Yes. So Allah giving the abilities certain people or something like that. Yes, it's all from Allah, but it's also connected with people's efforts. So it's a combination of both. But when someone acquires something, some scientist discovers something, whatever it is, yeah, of course, it's from Allah. Allah decided at this point in time, we're going to allow this person to discover it. This is definitely in the hands of Allah and in the control of Allah. Okay, very good question. Yeah, so how do you acquire Allah's acceptance, and how do you get to this level where He's actually teaching you? It's your sincerity and your effort. The two things, your sincerity and your effort. When you're sincere in what you're doing with Allah, you're sincere with Allah, and you're putting in the proper amount of effort, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you an understanding. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be pleased with you. And He will guide you, inshallah. And you have to keep on acting upon the things that you learn. So that maintains the sincerity, the level of sincerity that's there. Right, so meaning, if the question was, if Allah gives a shallow understanding or no understanding, what if Allah is giving like piece by piece to that person so that they grow? It doesn't mean that this all comes at once. Knowledge and wisdom is never something that just comes overnight. So Allah will be giving point in time. A shallow understanding means that the person assumes and thinks that they know everything, and they claim to know so much, but they actually know nothing. Right? A person who's learning and gradually increasing in knowledge, that's the way it's supposed to go. And that's the way that Allah actually teaches them. The question is, if there are people who are philosophical and they think they have a very deep understanding or something, are they really classified as having a deep understanding? No, not really. Because someone who, even when it comes to Islam, let alone Islam, like let's say for example, the Greek philosophers, right? If you look at, people consider them to be very deep thinkers and they analyze things. If you actually look at their theory of the active intellect, right? What's called the active intellect, and the active intellect branches out into this other type of intellect. It's basically a whole thing about idol worship. They took their idol worship and they formulated it in such a sophisticated way, you think this person is really intelligent, right? People who make arguments like lawyers, they can make very, 500-page arguments or something like that. It doesn't mean that it's deep. It means that it's sophisticated and complicated. Being sophisticated, being complex, does not necessarily mean deep in the correct sense of the word. Deep here means that in the sight of Allah, there's a proper contextualized understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really meant. Otherwise, people can take this and they go, well, my deep understanding, I'm going to break up this hadith. The word man has this many meanings in Arabic. And the letter meme actually was originated from this. And if you look at the shape of the meme and the noon combined together, it looks like this kind of boat or something like that. And you start going off and talking about all these other things. It looks so sophisticated, but actually, it's not actually what the point of this was in the first place. So there's a difference between, complex and a deep, meaning a correct understanding. You mean the correct understanding? Yes. So the deep understanding, one word you could use for it is basira, like insight, a good deep insight. Yes, correct insight. Yes, I mean, there is a time where we should dissect and we should look at things, but if it's not the time or it's not the place, see, that's what hikmah is, that's what wisdom is doing the right thing at the right time. We're going to talk about that. So that's very important that people have that as well. Otherwise, you could start, philosophizing about everything, Like you can talk about, why is there air and why are we breathing and, should we stop breathing and should we try this out? What's going to happen? Something like that. You have to, be very careful about these things as well. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, next hadith. Where is it? Okay. لا حسد إلا في اثنتين. رجل آتاه الله مالا فسلطه على هلكته في الحق ورجل آتاه الله حكمة فهو يقضي بها ويعلمها. Okay, so the translation of that is, there is no envy except with regard to two things. A man to whom Allah has given wealth and empowered him to spend for the truth, and a man to whom Allah has given wisdom and he acts by it and he teaches it. This is in Bukhari. So what does this mean? Right? The Prophet ﷺ, first of all, he's talking about envy. Okay? What is the definition of envy? This word hasad. He's saying, la hasad. There is no envy except in two things. So hasad or envy means that you see that someone else has something and you want it. But you don't just want the same thing that they have, you wish that you had it and they didn't have it. Right? So for example, someone else has a car. See, there's jealousy and there's envy in Islam. There's two different things. Jealousy could be translated as, someone has a really nice car and you want that car as well. So I wish I had the same kind of car. And if you got that car, you'd be happy. But then someone else, they have a car. Envy is someone has a car and everyone's so impressed, saying, man, you have such a nice car, and everyone's going and touching it and looking at it and taking pictures of it and everything. And you say, I wish I had the attention by having the same car. But if you got the same car, now there's not that much value to it. People would not come and take the same amount of pictures as they would if there was only one of them. So you say, I wish I had that specific car and no one else had it, so I would feel special. That's envy. Okay, that's envy. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, there is no envy except with regard to two things. Now, envy in Islam is something which is against Islam, right? It's prohibited. Now the Prophet is saying, no envy, meaning envy is not allowed in Islam, except in two cases. Except in two cases. Okay? Now we saw that this is a person who Allah is giving wealth and Allah is giving knowledge. So does that mean that we apply the same definition of envy and we wish we had taken the money from that person because we'd be spending it? No, that's not what it means. Okay, that's not what it means. This is not a hadith to allow this type of envy. It's a style of speaking. It's a style of speaking, right? It's a way of putting emphasis on words and saying that obviously envy is not allowed. Something that's understood. But if it were going to be allowed, right? If it was going to be allowed, and if you had to be envious about anything in life, these are the two type of things you should be envious about. Right? Meaning that everything else is a waste. Why would you envy anyone for anything else? You have, for example, someone has a car and you want the same kind of car. Someone has a phone, you want the same phone. Why would you even, put your train of thought in something petty like that? When you could actually aim for the sky and you could, put your focus on something else. That's the style of speaking. Like, Mullah Rumi, very famous poet, he has an interesting line of poetry. He says that if you're going to commit adultery, at least commit adultery with a princess and not with a prostitute. Right? So does that mean that Rumi is telling you to go and commit adultery with the princess? No, he's making a point that if you were going to do something like that, at least aim high in what you're doing, meaning at least go for the princess or something like that, meaning that, why are you wasting your time? The whole point is, don't waste your time in something so, petty, right? You could have done better than that, meaning don't do it anyways, but you could have done better than that. Same thing the Prophet ﷺ is trying to say is that if you had to have envy, if you were going to be envious about someone, you shouldn't be envious over petty material possessions and all of that. Be envious about something which has real value. So he's trying to emphasize the value of these two things, okay? In order to emphasize their greatness. In order to emphasize the greatness of these two things. That's pretty much the whole point of the hadith. We're going to talk about how amazing these two attributes are, these two characteristics. And then he said, إِلَّا فِثْنَتَيْن, except for two. Now, he used the number two. Does the number two, does it mean two all the time? I think, did we talk about this last week? We didn't talk about, okay. Remember, so the thing is, how many of you have a technical background? Technical meaning like engineering, science, mathematics, something like that. Raise your hand. Technical background. Okay. How many of you have a arts, humanities kind of background? Poetry, English literature, communications, and all of that. Okay. Generally, what ends up happening is people who come from a very technical background, they see things in their world as being very technical. So the two means two, and that's it. Right? The number two, if the Prophet said, there's no envy except in two. Two means two, and there's no exception. There's nothing else. It cannot be three, because two is very clear. It's fixed, right? People who come from generally more, artistic backgrounds or something like social sciences or whatever, they can understand that the word two is simply being used as an example. It's not being used as a delimiting or limiting number. It's just an example. So you will find this being used in certain ways where it's not always exactly the way it is. So the Prophet ﷺ, he's mentioning two as examples. It doesn't mean that there can't be another example. What if someone came and said, well, you know what if Allah gave a special ability to fight to somebody, and they do that for the sake of Allah? Could that be a third? Say, no, two means two, and that's it. That's not what it means. So be aware of that. Be cautious of that. So except for two is to emphasize the importance of these two things, but it was never to limit. It's just you can make an analogy and apply the same kind of people and something similar would also be, are also great things. They're also great positions and statuses. So spending, number one, you have, where'd it go? A person to whom Allah has given wealth and empowered him to spend for the truth. Meaning spend it in the ways that Allah would be pleased with. That's what it means, spending for the truth. Okay? So, wealth is a blessing. Right? Oftentimes we talk about the harms of wealth. And that's very important to reflect upon how dangerous money and wealth can be. But it can also be a blessing. It's a blessing that people have, but there's a test. When they're given it, what do they do with it? How do they utilize their wealth? Right? And do they spend it? Now, it says what? A person who's given wealth and empowered him to spend for the truth. Now, if you're spending for the sake of Allah, you're spending for the truth, is it sufficient or there's something else that's needed in that action? There's something else that's needed, and that's sincerity. The intention has to be sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is kind of implied in the hadith as well, in some of the words there. And the truth, as I said before, it means in doing that which Allah would be pleased with. So what kind of spending can you do? Just quick, open up. What kind of spending can you do which would be spending for the truth, spending in the path of Allah? Spending, giving money to poor people who are really in need. What else? Building a masjid. Great example, yes. Gaining knowledge. Yes, gaining knowledge. Spending your wealth to gain knowledge. Yes. Buying food for your family. Right? Buying food for your family with the intention that it's your responsibility to take care of your family. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you this wealth, you're spending that. So there's many ways, right? I think that's sufficient, inshallah. So there's many ways to spend for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Then he says, the number two category is a person to whom Allah has given wisdom, hikmah, wisdom, and he acts by it and he teaches it. Okay? Now what is wisdom? There's two types of wisdom. There's revelational wisdom, meaning the wisdom that Allah has directly revealed to prophets, like we talked about prophetic wisdom that the prophets have been given, and there's rational wisdom. The wisdom that you can kind of use and figure out for yourself what are things. Like, what is the right way of doing things? What is the right thing to say? What is the right thing to do in such a scenario? Okay? And this wisdom is used in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's used in something which Allah will be pleased with. Now the traditional definition of wisdom, according to Muslim scholars, is that you're doing the right thing at the right time. That's the traditional definition of wisdom. So if you did the right thing but you did it at the wrong time, or you did the wrong thing but you did it at the right time, it's not going to work. So like for example, speaking, right? If you're going to go and you're going to say some nice words to somebody, but the right time was the time at this point in time that person needed to be reprimanded. That person needed to be warned. Speaking nicely or speaking kind words that will make them justify some action that they were doing is not wisdom. It was not done at the right place, at the right time, in the right moment, all of these things. That's wisdom. Okay? So there's two types of wisdom. Okay, so we talked about that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, a person who Allah has given wisdom. Again, did it say a person who learned wisdom himself? No. The person whom Allah has given that wisdom to. So it's coming again from Allah. And then there's a prerequisite. There's a prerequisite. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you something, you need to do what? And it says, He acts by it and He teaches it. So this is the thing. When Allah gives you wisdom or Allah gives you knowledge, you have to act according to it as well. And you have a responsibility to teach other people in your capacity. In your capacity. So I hope this is very clear that the things that we learn here, for example, these are not just certain things that we're going to go through and we say, you know what, this is very nice, but we're not really going to practice them. Right? And the second thing is we're not just going to learn them and say, you know what, now I can boast that I know this many, I've studied this many hadith, I'm not going to tell anybody else. No, it's our job to go home, educate our families, educate our friends. When we're in a social gathering or something like that, you could bring up one of these hadiths. If someone starts quoting to you that, last week's drama, this person cheated on this person. Say, well, that's nice, but there's a great hadith that I learned, and it's this and this and this, and you come up with it, and you change the subject of the conversation. Imagine the world, imagine how the Muslim Ummah would change just by sharing a little bit of knowledge every time. Just a few minutes of knowledge, how it would change. And in fact, one of my hopes is that what we do in this masjid is after Fajr, you can pick any prayer. After Fajr, we just take one of these, statements, and we just share it with people, and we have a quick reflection on it, for example, and it benefits a lot of people. And I was in another place where, we were in a city, like a village, and there was almost nobody there, and we started this, tradition where there was a lot of scholars in the school, and they started, narrating one hadith after a certain prayer. And I'm telling you, it changed people's lives. It really changed people's lives, who've been coming and they've been praying and they've not been doing anything. So one of the hopes that I have is that every masjid that people are coming from, their local masjid where they're coming from, is that they take the stuff that they've learned here and they start sharing this. There are people who are coming from, some place there's a tiny little area where nothing's going on. People just pray and they leave, masjid is locked. And they go in, open the masjid, they come in and pray, and they leave and it's locked again. There's a lot more that we could do, a lot more, things that we can share. Now that you're understanding, what the hadith is, how to break it down, you kind of have a general understanding, you can share that. And I would like you to share that. And if there's no one else to do that in the masjid, even the sisters can come and say, look, hand me a microphone, let me give you a quick reminder or something like that. Following whatever guidelines need to be followed. But that can be done and that should be done. So acting upon the knowledge is one thing, and sharing the knowledge is another, and both of them are responsibilities for the people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this to. So it's very important to understand this and how great these two acts are. Okay? So any questions on this? Rational wisdom. Okay, so you touch a burning pot, you burned yourself, right? Wisdom tells you what? Don't touch it again, right? If it's burning. Same thing, that's rational wisdom, something you can figure out on your own. You don't necessarily have to learn it from this. Somebody burns you, right? Somebody, rips you off in a deal. You're careful next time the person you're dealing with, if this transaction looks very similar, if you get an email, right, from Nigeria telling you to, deposit this much money in this account, wisdom teaches you that, I had seen this before, I need to be a little bit careful, right? And there's something that's rational wisdom. You get a chain mail, and the chain mail tells you that, if you don't forward this to 70 people, then this and this thing's going to happen to you. But no, you learn better because you attended CIS, and you know that those things don't apply. Right? So rational wisdom. No, it's not. It's the revelational wisdom is for prophets, but when we study the hadith, we're learning from the revelational wisdom as well. How do you balance that? Yeah, so a very good question. So if there's dangers in quoting a hadith, how do you balance between something you studied but maybe you didn't get it 100%, or you think you might have made a mistake, or what level do you start sharing because you might have made a mistake in understanding or something like that? You kind of have to use your best judgment. First of all, if there's somebody more knowledgeable than you and they could do the same thing, you go ahead and you defer to them and say, you go ahead and you handle it because you already know anyways. If there's no one else around or no one else is up to the task or whatever, then if you know that no one else is there who can do the job, and you know that if I were to make a small mistake in understanding something like this, the effect that it would have is not that great, go ahead and do it. If the effect that it would have is really big, then you be careful. Were you here last week? You were here last week. So the same thing. So is it right to quote hadith in general gatherings to convince the other person? I mean, it really depends. It's about wisdom. It depends on who you're trying to convince and why you're trying to convince them. Right? If somebody comes and says, I believe that there's nothing wrong with riba, with interest, for example, and you have to kind of somehow kind of convince them that no, what you're saying, this is not correct. Actually, your understanding is not correct. And they say, I will not believe it until you can prove to me for something. In that case, quoting a verse of the Quran or quoting a hadith, it would be a correct context. There's a reason for that. If you didn't have to do that, or there's no need to do that, or you don't know the hadith correctly, then yeah, you shouldn't be quoting it. So there's a time to quote and there's a time not to quote. It really depends on the context. Really, really depends. And it depends if you know what you're quoting as well. You have to know what you're quoting at the same time. Right? Like we talked last week about the whole, like the Bismillah hadith, right? Before eating and all of that, right? So there's a context. If you don't know it, you don't understand it, don't quote it. If there's no need to quote it and you just tell the person, look, man, if you have like pork in front of you, right? Forget the hadith part, right? If there's a pork chop in front of you, as a Muslim, you don't eat it. There's no need to quote a hadith, right? If they say, no, I'm not going to accept it until you believe this, or I'm going to quote this hadith or something like that, then maybe there's a need to explain them, maybe you can refer them to someone, or maybe if you have to quote a hadith, if you know what you're talking about, then it's okay. I think you're probably referring to people who just quote hadith left and right all over the place, and they kind of use it as a bullying tactic, right? Like they're like somebody I think called them like hadith snipers or something like that. They're like shooting people with hadith, right? It's like getting them, it's like, I got you again, shot you with another hadith. It's something that's more like etiquette. That's akhlaq. That's like your behavior. That's not the way you quote a hadith. Like, boom, you slapped it down like on the table. Like, look at that one. What did you think about that? That's not good character anyways. So that's something else, inshallah. Any questions on the slide? Okay, let's move to the next one, inshallah. Where are we? إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْزِعُ الْعِلْمَ بَعْدَ أَنْ أَعْطَاكُمُوهُ انتزاعا ولكن ينتزعه منهم مع قبض العلماء بعلمهم فيبقى ناس جهال يستفتون فيفتون برأيهم فيضلون ويضلون. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah will not remove knowledge after He has given it to you, but it will be removed when the people of knowledge die and ignorant people remain, who will be asked to give answers and will give them according to their own opinions. They will go astray and they will lead others astray as well. Okay? So, you find that the Prophet ﷺ is making this statement about knowledge. Okay, about knowledge and about wisdom. That's the translation there. So, first thing he said that Allah will not remove knowledge. Okay? He's talking about the Muslim community. He's talking about society in general. Allah is not going to remove knowledge that after He's given it to you, meaning the revelation that He's given, the understanding of revelation that's been given from the prophets, the message of Islam that's been conveyed to the people. He's not just going to take it away all of a sudden. There's a way and a form that He's going to take it away. But what knowledge are we talking about right now here? Which knowledge are we talking about? We're talking about revelational knowledge, meaning understanding of things that have been given to you by Allah through the prophets. That's the type of knowledge that Allah is talking about here at this point in time. Okay? Why? Because generally when you find the word ilm in a hadith, specific to the context of religion or specific to the context of Islam, it usually means the knowledge of Islam. Because there's different types of knowledge. The Prophet was focusing on the type of knowledge related to Islam. Okay? And then he says, after He's given it to you. So we've seen this so many times. The Prophet is always saying He's given it to you. He's given it to you. Allah is the one who's giving knowledge. So we've seen that and that's quite clear now. And then he says, but it will be removed when the people of knowledge die. So the people who have the knowledge, they're going to die. The Prophet is describing one phenomenon of how the knowledge is going to be taken away. So if the people of knowledge die, how is it that the knowledge disappeared? It means the knowledge was not transmitted to the other people. So it's not just about the person dying, it's about the fact that nobody learned from these people. The companions of the Prophet, if Allah wanted to take away the knowledge, no one would have learned from the companions. If the prophets are sent and the prophets convey the message, how would the knowledge be taken away from that group of people? The Prophet dies but no one learned anything. That's how it would be taken away. Meaning Allah is not going to come all of a sudden and just take it away wipe people's memory away and all of a sudden the knowledge is gone. If Allah decides because of the sins that these people have and because they're not following, He wants to remove the knowledge, this is the way it's going to be removed. So it tells you about the importance of teaching and the importance of learning. Just in and of itself right there, it's about the importance of teaching and the importance of learning. So it says, an ignorant, what's going to happen? Ignorant people. Now what is an ignorant person? An ignorant person is someone who didn't learn and who doesn't know, right? Opposite of knowledge. There's knowledge and there's ignorance. So an ignorant people will remain who will be asked, here is ignorant. Where's ignorant? Now the thing is, they're ignorant about the knowledge. And the worst type of ignorance is that they're ignorant of the fact that they're ignorant. You see? They're ignorant of their own status. So there are people, we're talking about a specific group of people who are double ignorant. There are those people who don't know, right? And they know that they don't know. So what are they going to do? They're going to ask those people who know. Right? Now if you don't know and you think that you know, who are you going to ask? You can't ask, you're not going to ask anyone because you think you already know. This is the worst sign of ignorance. It's another status of thinking that you know, but you don't even know, so you're ignorant of yourself even. So they're ignorant of their own status. Now, what's going to happen? Those people will remain, meaning there's going to be a lot of them. Okay? And they will be asked to give answers. Right? Yustaftun, from the word fatwa. This is where the word fatwa comes from. Those of you who are familiar with fatwa, very common in the media and all of that. The word fatwa comes from this. So meaning they're going to be, a fatwa is an answer to someone who was, istafta, meaning somebody asked you for a fatwa and you gave them a fatwa, you gave them an answer. So these are people who are going to be asked. They're going to be asked for religious rulings. What does this verse of the Quran mean? Right? What does this hadith mean? Or can you explain to me what does this concept mean over here? And they're ignorant, they don't know what it means, and they don't even know, or perhaps they know and they're misleading, but generally they don't even know that they're ignorant of it. So what's going to end up happening? They're going to give an answer according to their own opinions. Okay, their own opinion. Now when we're using the term difference of opinion, and we're using the term opinion in certain things that we teach, when we say opinion of someone who's informed, we say there's a difference of opinion. When we're talking about giving someone your own opinion, their own opinion of ignorance is based upon nothing. It's based upon just whatever I feel like. Well, I think that this hadith means this, just because you read it one time, the first time in your life you read it, and you think that because, you have a PhD in physics or something like that, so, well, I should be able to interpret this hadith as well. So my understanding, because, after all, I am a professor, in physics, no doubt, but still I'm a professor, I can go ahead and give you an answer. People fall into this level of ignorance. So they're going to give an answer according to their own understanding, which is either one of two things. It's either going to be just blatantly wrong. Okay, ignorance will manifest itself because they just don't understand. Right? Like, I don't know if the brother is here or not. If he is, I'm not trying to pick on you. But somebody came to me the other day and he said, well, you quoted this hadith in your khutbah, and the actual wording you translated it this way, the actual word means this. It means something completely different. Right? And it turns out, I said, that's nice, but that's in modern day Egyptian Arabic. Right? This hadith was said by the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, 1400 years ago. So this word, if you look it up, has several different meanings. Right? This is not the meaning that you're used to, that you hear in your society today in the 21st century. Just because that's the context that you know doesn't mean that this is the only meaning of the word. The meaning of the word at that time and in this context, according to dictionaries, according to scholarly references, means this. So they couldn't understand that. He had a difficulty understanding. If the word was tahur, he had difficulty understanding that. Right? So the thing is, that is based upon a wrong understanding because you lack the knowledge. You lack an understanding. The second thing could be, it's an answer that's tainted by your desires. The person who's ignorant will give an answer, even though they may kind of know, they'll kind of change it around a little bit to try and justify to themselves that no, this should be okay. Everything's going to be okay. So if we go ahead and, modify this text a little bit, it's going to be easier for me and I'm going to get more benefit or whatever it may be. This is a major problem. Okay? So they're going to answer with their own opinion. And not only are they going to be astray themselves, but they're leading other people astray. So who's going astray here? Who's going off on the wrong path? They themselves are on the wrong path, and they're leading other people off on the wrong path. Right? Now the people who are being led off on the wrong path, right? Whose responsibility is it? Are they free from blame because they just got the wrong answers? No. Right? No, they're not. To the extent that they were able to research it or figure it out or try and realize that something else is wrong, Allah knows to what extent they were able to figure it out. So if they did not have the capacity to figure it out because either they're new to Islam, or they had not had the opportunity to learn anything, or they had learned something but this was something really minor, not so major, they're not going to be held responsible at that point. But if they did have a capacity, and Allah knows best, then they will be held responsible for that. So we have to be very, very careful about these things. Okay, any questions on that? Yeah, it doesn't mean that this is going to apply necessarily across the board. So it can apply in one area, and it may not apply in one area. So this could be applied in different areas. In one place, there may be an area which is afflicted by this, and there's another place where there's an area which is not afflicted by this. Right? So this is pretty much the understanding for us today. Right? But at the same time, we do have the internet. We do have communications. We do have ability that people did not have in the past before. So if you wanted to look at it from that perspective, it could be that we actually have access, if we search hard enough, we have access to knowledge across the board. Yeah, you cannot necessarily trust all the sources. So you have to figure out which sources that you can trust, right? And that's an individual effort that people have to make and come to a reason that these are sources that we can trust, and these are other sources that we cannot trust. So we have to be careful. Sometimes we have to have our limits. So the question is: are the messages that were sent before the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, were they taken because people didn't follow? That was one of the ways they were taken. One of the ways, either they were changed intentionally by the leaders, or people did not convey the right messages across the board and they changed. They lost the message, so there was nothing left. The knowledge was gone. That's how different religions started out. Okay, good. So some people have it. Those who printed out the PowerPoint slides very, very early, this hadith wasn't in there, but it's in your book. It's in your book. It was in your book, but it was not in the old slides, so it's in the new slides. So just be aware of that. It's in your book. Okay. So if you can repeat after me, مَجْتَمَعَ قَوْمٌ فِي بَيْتٍ مِّن بُيُوتِ اللَّهِ يَتْلُونَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَيَتَدَارَسُونَهُ بَيْنَهُمْ إِلَّا نَزَلَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّكِينَةُ وَغَشِيَتْهُمُ الرَّحْمَةُ وَحَفَّتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَذَكَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَنْ عِنْدَهُ. Any gathering that assembles in one of the houses of Allah to recite the book of Allah and mutually study it will be blessed with tranquility, covered with mercy, surrounded by angels, and mentioned by Allah to those in His presence. And this is mentioned in Muslim. So we see there's gathering. Okay? What is a gathering and why is there a gathering? The thing is, why is the Prophet ﷺ mentioning a gathering? What if somebody sits by themselves and they study the Quran and they read it and they're doing all of these good things? Why wouldn't these things apply? The Prophet ﷺ is trying to emphasize the importance of a gathering. Why do people gather together? Right? Why do people come together? For social reasons, for the most part, right? There's some kind of social need or emotional need or some kind of communication that they have with one another. The Prophet ﷺ is trying to redirect the purpose behind why people gather and trying to encourage them and motivate them that they should have this intention sometimes when they gather and when they meet together. This is one of the great things that they can do, and one of the things that they can achieve, and one of the things that they can accomplish. So this is a good reminder to redirect. Right? The next thing is that the Prophet ﷺ specified in one of the houses of Allah, meaning like in a masjid. Right? House of Allah is the masjid, a mosque. Right? Now why did he specify that? Why did he indicate that? Because of the greatness of the place, or the greatness of the place in which you're actually in. Because this is a place where Allah is worshipped. That's a special place. If you go to a place where Allah is not, where shaitan is worshipped, Satan is worshipped, very opposite, different place, right? A place where Allah is neglected, you're not allowed to mention His name. a very different place. So the masjid is being specified because of the greatness of the place. And he's trying to mention more people because the greatness of the gathering, more people are there and they're doing the same thing. And then he says to study, okay? To study. So it says, first of all, it says to recite the book of Allah. So they're reciting the book of Allah, they're reciting the Quran, number one. And number two, they're mutually studying it as well at the same time. يَتَدَارَسُونَهُ, meaning they're trying to, they're going back and forth and they're all studying it together, concurrently. Right? Which means what? Which means everyone is actively engaged. It's an active process and they're all trying to study, they're all trying to learn it. With what intention? Why are you studying something? To try to understand it so that you can practice upon it. They're not philosophizing about it, like we just talked about recently, right? They're not trying to go and get sophisticated and complex about it. They're trying to understand what does it actually mean, how can we apply it in our lives, and that's the whole point. That's the whole point, and that's why this gathering is so blessed. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you see one of these gatherings, what is actually happening when this gathering comes? Number one, they're going to be blessed with tranquility. Tranquility, sakina. What is tranquility? It means peace. It means, they're going to be happy. They're going to be content. Their stress is going to be gone. All of these effects that are going to take place. Now why? How does this happen just naturally? It's because when people are studying the word of Allah, the book of Allah, the goal is all their thoughts about this world are going to be thrown aside. They're going to be focused. And if they're really focused, they're thinking about this. They're not thinking about, I have to do this, and I have these bills to pay, or I have so many other issues in my life. They're focusing on this, and they're finding solutions in the things that they're studying for their life, so they get tranquility. They get tranquility at that point in time in particular, and perhaps afterwards as well. And then, mercy, they're covered with mercy. They are covered with mercy. What does that mean, they're covered with mercy? Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a special status for those people who are doing this because of the greatness of the action. And He is more likely to forgive them, and He starts forgiving them because of this thing that they're doing. Because of the thing that they're doing, and they're doing it together, and they're inside a great place at the same time. It doesn't mean it only applies in a masjid. It doesn't mean it doesn't apply as an individual. It means though that this is the best way. This is one of the best ways because you're in the best place, you're studying the best thing, and you have the best people around you because they're also there to study at the same time. And then it says, what will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? And they're mentioned by Allah to those in His presence. Now who's in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The angels, right? Other spiritual beings that we don't know of perhaps. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those people that are, or those creations that are around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah mentions them, mentions you in their presence. Now what does that mean? Right? This is dhikr. Dhikr means the remembrance of Allah. When you take time out of your day and you mention Allah, you remember Allah, it means you're giving Allah priority because Allah is important in your life. Now imagine Allah is making dhikr of you. This is amazing. I mean, this means that Allah is saying that you are something special in His sight because of the thing that you're doing. And He's not, now you're not mentioning Him, He's mentioning you in front of other people, showing, look how great this person is. Look how amazing these people are. See these people who are studying sincerely for my sake? These people are amazing. Just imagine someone takes time out to mention you, like look how great this person is. This is Allah doing it for you. Shows you the importance of knowledge. It shows you the importance of these types of gatherings. And anyone who's in a type of gathering like our class here, inshallah, by the will of Allah, this can be a gathering that falls into a similar criteria, that falls into the same category as well. Because we're trying to study the words of the Prophet. The words of the Prophet, as we learned last week, they're a supplement to the Quran, to explain and contextualize the Quran. So we're studying this, and inshallah we fall at least at some point into this category as well because of what we're doing. So it shows you the importance. Why is this all happening? Because the importance of knowledge and the importance of learning. This is the first thing we need to start with in this book so that we understand what we're doing is not something just on the side. This is something very, very serious and something very, very important. Okay, any questions on this? The Prophet ﷺ said, لا يلدغ المؤمن. Let's try that again. لا يلدغ المؤمن من جحر واحد مرتين. A believer is not stung from the same hole twice. Very simple, right? A believer is not stung from the same hole twice. So the word that the Prophet used was mu'min. The mu'min is a believer. Now what is he saying? That a believer is not stung. Now what does that mean? It means a true believer, right? One of the characteristics of a believer is that they don't allow this thing to happen to them. Had we taken this completely literally, if somebody got stung from the same hole twice, they're not a believer anymore. They've just left Islam. But that's not what it means, right? So the Prophet, he's always using the term the believer, the believer. It means that it's trying to emphasize, if you want to be a true Muslim, you want to be a true believer, you want to be the best of the best, you want to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, try to do these type of things. So a believer, one characteristic of the believer is to not be stung twice. Now what does stung mean? He's giving an analogy. Okay, he's giving an analogy of like an animal hole or an insect hole or something like that. So if you walk up to one of these holes and you put your hand inside, and let's say you were you drop something in there, and you put your hand inside and you get stung all of a sudden. Let's say there was some, scorpion or something like that. In the desert at that time, he's using an example. Let's say there was a scorpion and it stung you. You just got bit, right? Now would you go and you wait a little while, the poison kind of, dissipates and everything, and you say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and try and grab it again. You wouldn't do that, right? You would not do that. You would learn your lesson, right? So you would learn your lesson, number one, from the same hole twice. Now, in another hole, if you find another place in another area that looks very similar to the same hole, you should also learn your lesson and say, well, this hole looks very similar to the previous hole in which I was stung at. So I'm not going to, put my hand in the same type of thing because I might get stung again. Right? Very simple. So the Prophet ﷺ saying is, getting stung is making a mistake in life. Some mistake that you made in life, somebody ripped you off. You were talking to the wrong person and you found out that you ended up doing something haram, something forbidden in Islam because you were talking to that person, or you got out of line, or you started doing this, or you started doing that. This becomes problematic, right? You realize that this didn't work, it led me down the wrong path. You make sure not to repeat it again. Just like we were talking about the test. You get the wrong answer on the test or something like that. When you go and you review again and you look at it, you're going to be even more cautious and careful. I'm not going to make this mistake again. So sometimes making a mistake once is actually beneficial. Why? Because once you make the mistake once, you're going to be even more careful. A true believer is going to be even more careful the second time. And that's why some of the scholars, they say when Prophet Adam, first human being, why did he eat from the tree that he was not supposed to eat from? In order for us to come down to earth and all of that. It's not a cause, we were going to come to earth anyways. But most of you know the story. The thing is, why did he eat from the tree? Scholars say, because Allah was preparing him for this world. At that point in time, he was not being held responsible for his actions. When he came on earth and his real life started, and he has free will, he's going to be held responsible for his actions. Allah wanted him to get a taste of what it's like to make a mistake and to learn from that mistake. So now he's going to be even more careful the next time. Because the more mistakes you make, if you learn from them, the more careful you are than other people who never made the mistake in their life. This is the thing. So we have to learn as believers, we learn our lesson. So never get bit from the same hole twice. So you learn from the past mistake, right? And then the thing he says, min juhrin wahidin, from one hole, meaning one and the same exact hole. So you could apply analogy. The example he gave was the most ridiculous example. Meaning like how foolish could you be? If you got bit from another hole, blame on you. You shouldn't have done that. But if you got bit from the exact same hole in the same place, the same animal on top of that, ridiculous. How could you not learn your lesson? So he's making it very powerful and explaining that this would be very foolish of you if you didn't learn your lesson in the first place. Okay? Any questions on this hadith? Okay. No question. All right, so next hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, لَيْسَ الشَّدِيدُ بِالسُّرْعَةِ إِنَّمَا الشَّدِيدُ الَّذِي يَمْلِكُ نَفْسَهُ عِنْدَ الْغَضَبِ. The strong one is not the expert fighter, but he who can control himself when angry. It's in Bukhari. The one who's really strong. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, the strong one. What is he doing? Very interesting thing that the Prophet ﷺ does. in his hadith, he's redefining terms for us. And he does this in a lot of things. This is a very important technique of education, of educators. You redefine a term which most people know. So if you tell someone, who is a strong person? The definition of strong in the minds of most people is what? Someone who's physically strong, rough muscles, and they can lift a lot of weight, and they could do all of these things. That's the definition of a strong, tough person, right? Now the Prophet ﷺ is redefining and saying, that's not my definition of a strong person. Right? That's not my understanding of a strong person. So the way he's teaching is he's redefining terms. This is very, very important to today's context. We need to utilize this strategy that the Prophet ﷺ used to use, especially when it comes to politics and Muslims in the public sphere and Muslims in the media and all of that. Because we're always taught that, do you believe in jihad? Right? If you say yes, you're in trouble. And if you say no, you're in trouble too, because you just denied something which is part of Islam. You say, I'm going to redefine it for you. I'm not going to accept your definition of what jihad means. I'm going to redefine, I'm going to tell you, if you mean fighting against oppression and people who are killing other innocent people, then yes, I believe in that. Now what do they have to say? Nothing. Right? If they say, do you believe in this and that? If you redefine the term for them, or you prepare to define it yourself in the first place, it makes a world of difference. So this is what the Prophet ﷺ is doing. It's a tactic, educational tactic. For those of you who teach children, for example, it's very important we use this tactic to redefine terms. It's one of his teaching strategies that he had. And then he said, the strong one is not the one who's an expert fighter or a good martial artist who has MMA and knows Tai Chi and Taekwondo and all of these things, right? That's what most people would think. But he says, no, that's not the person. That's not the definition. That's not what I'm talking about. Sura'a means like wrestler, basically someone who can pin the other person to the ground really good. But he says, no, the real definition is someone who can control themselves when they're angry. It's even more difficult. That's what the real measure of strength is. Now, let's look at anger for a moment. Okay, anger is considered to be negative in Islam generally. Most people understand that anger is a negative trait or a negative attribute. But anger can actually be positive. Right? Why? Because it can lead you to action. There are times where anger can lead you to do something. So for example, if people are being killed or your family is being murdered or something like that, if you see someone just saying, that's really bad, that's just unfortunate, and that's life, and we just move on. They're not moving, and it's time for them to move and do something, and they're supposed to do something about it. This is a problem. So it's not really defined 100% as anger, but there's something in you that you get this feeling where you feel like, we need to go do something about this. I'm not just going to stay still. So Imam Shafi'i has a very interesting line of poetry. He says, "Man istughdiba wa lam yaghdab fa huwa himar." Whoever is aroused to anger and doesn't get angry is a donkey. Basically what he was trying to say is, anger is natural. There are times where you shouldn't be completely passive, where you don't care about anything. Right? Just everything that happens is perfectly natural. But anger, we're going to talk about this more in the purification of the heart class, but anger is usually something where people take it and they manifest it in a negative way. That's why we perceive anger to be a negative thing. It's usually negative because of what it leads to, not because of the natural consequence, not because the actual feeling. So what does anger do? It clouds your thoughts, and you're not able to think properly. And you go and you start saying things, and you do stupid things, and you do foolish things, and then all of a sudden you can't take them back. And then the person in front of you is hurt, maybe your family member is hurt, your friend is hurt, and then you're like, I said all of that in anger. Well, it's very difficult to take all of that back. So anger is a very big problem, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ is saying the really strong person, real definition of strength is if you can control yourself when you're angry. That's when you know you're strong. That's when that's something that, so basically he's saying, what is the main point of this hadith? He's saying, learn to control your anger. Even though it's difficult, it takes a very strong person to control their anger, but you need to, man up, you need to be strong, and you need to be able to control it. Because you should not allow this to get the best of you, and should not allow yourself to lose your temper. Okay? Into the child? Well, see, the thing is, the child is not going to be held responsible, for the most part, for their actions. Right? In terms of parenting, I think that's a different topic. in terms of why children are angry and stuff like that. But in terms of this is more for adults who have the ability to control their own temper and their own anger, and they're supposed to do that. They're supposed to keep their actions in check. When it comes to children, I think that's more on the side of parenting. And there's different theory about whether it's natural or it's not natural. There are some children who are more active, or you can say hyperactive, and they manifest themselves in a different way. So there's certain ways to deal with those type of children. There's certain ways to talk to them and address them and channel their energy in a positive way, rather than trying to tone them down and make them like passive children. It's actually a good characteristic. And children are born naturally with the fitrah. They have certain ways. So some people are more active, right? And you say, well, because they're active, it seems like they're going crazy all over the place. No, they're not crazy. They're active. There's a way you can channel that activism in the little kids in a positive way. Whereas some are more passive, they're easy to deal with, but they may not have the pro that the other child who's active may have. But they have other good qualities. So there's other things that they can learn to do. So it's really taking a child's talents and focusing them in the right direction. Yes. So some ways to control your anger, like you mentioned. If you're really upset, if you're standing, you sit down. If you're sitting down, you can lie down. If you get really upset or angry, you go and you perform wudu as well. You go and wash yourself, take a bath maybe or something like that. Walk away from a situation. All of these things are there, and we're going to address them in detail in the class on purification of the heart. Inshallah. Okay. So we'll take a break. Inshallah, we will resume afterwards. Assalamu alaikum.